Solomon wrote Proverbs as a father writes a letter he cannot deliver in person. He gathered short, sharp sayings, repeated refrains, and vivid images not to display his perfection, but to pass on what he had learned the hard way. The book opens with words of instruction and the repeated address, "My son," and that repetition is not ornamental. It is the cadence of a man who knows time is limited and who wants his voice to reach a future he may never see. Proverbs is practical, it is moral, it is urgent. It reads like a manual because it is meant to be used. A lamp for the path, a guardrail for the heart, a set of tools for a life that will be tested. But the urgency behind those tools comes from experience. Solomon did not write from a place of untested theory. He wrote from the wreckage of choices and the clarity of hindsight. He wrote because he had seen how a life can be bent and broken by small, repeated compromises. He wrote because he had loved and lost, because he had been seduced by comfort and flattered by power, because he had watched the slow corrosion of a heart that once knew God. At the center of Proverbs is a father's plea. The voice that repeats "my son" is not a distant teacher's voice. It is a parent's voice. It is the voice of a man who imagines his son standing at crossroads he himself once walked. The instructions are not abstract virtues. They are survival skills for a future king of a household, a community, perhaps a nation. Solomon's counsel covers speech and silence, work and rest, anger and restraint, friendship and isolation. He teaches how to read people, how to value a good name over quick gain, how to choose companions who sharpen rather than dull. Each short saying is a small, practical discipline meant to be practiced until it becomes habit. But the book's most insistent warnings are not about etiquette or industry. They are about seduction and idolatry. Time and again, Solomon warns against the woman who flatters and entices, whose house leads down to death. He paints the seductress in vivid, relentless language because he knows the pattern: attraction, rationalization, secrecy, worship of something other than God. That pattern is not merely sexual, it is spiritual. It is the way a man's heart can be turned away from the center by something that promises life but delivers ruin. Solomon's repeated alarms about the immoral woman are not moralizing abstractions. They are the echoes of a man who walked that road and felt its consequences. Solomon's life provides the painful context for those warnings. He was a king with every advantage: wealth, wisdom, fame. Yet he married foreign wives who brought foreign gods into his court. He allowed alliances and affections to become compromises. He built altars to other gods. He let intimacy with the wrong people become a wedge between himself and the God who had given him wisdom. The seduction he warns against in Proverbs is the seduction he experienced, the slow drift from devotion into accommodation, from worship of the true God into the worship of lesser things. That drift did not happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened in 1,000 small concessions, in the softening of boundaries, in the acceptance of what once would have been intolerable. Idolatry, in Solomon's account, is not only the worship of carved images. It is the human tendency to let anything take God's place: power, pleasure, reputation, money, a relationship that demands more of a man than his conscience can give. Solomon's proverbs about riches and flattery, about the deceit of easy gain and the danger of trusting in wealth, are warnings against the forms idolatry takes in daily life. He knew how quickly a man can begin to trust the wrong things, to seek security in what cannot secure him, to trade wisdom for the temporary comforts of the world. Because Solomon had fallen into these patterns, his voice in Proverbs is both stern and tender. He does not speak from a pedestal. He speaks from a scarred place. That is why his counsel is so relentless. Repetition is the language of urgency. He repeats the same warnings because he knows how forgetful the human heart can be. He repeats the same commands because he knows how easily a son can be seduced by flattering words and smooth promises. He repeats the same images because he wants the lessons to be worn, carried, and passed on. Proverbs is also a training manual for leadership. Solomon's instructions are aimed at a son who will one day govern others, but the first governance is of the self. He teaches restraint in speech because a leader's words can build or destroy. He teaches diligence in work because a leader's household depends on steady hands. He teaches humility because pride destroys counsel and isolates a ruler from wise advisors. He teaches discernment in choosing friends because the company a man keeps shapes his character. These are not abstract ideals for philosophers. They are practical rules for a man who will be tested by power, tempted by flattery, and surrounded by those who would use him. The parental tone of Proverbs is not merely about instruction, it is about legacy. Solomon understood that a kingdom can be lost not only by war, but by the erosion of a ruler's heart. He understood that the most durable inheritance is not land or gold, but the capacity to choose well. So he binds wisdom around the neck of his son, he writes it on the tablet of the heart. He urges the son to keep it close. Wisdom, in Solomon's framing, is an inheritance that outlasts palaces and crowns. It is the map that helps a man navigate temptation, the compass that points back to what matters when everything else seems to promise more. And yet Solomon's book is not merely a catalogue of warnings, it is a confession turned into counsel. The very intensity of his alarms reveals a man who has learned from failure. He does not spare himself in the telling. The book's moral clarity is sharpened by the fact that its author knew the cost of ignoring his own advice. That is the redemptive twist of Proverbs. The mistakes of one generation become the guardrails for the next. Solomon's scars become the teacher's chalk. His regrets become the father's voice. He writes not to absolve himself, but to spare his son. The practical takeaways Solomon offers are simple and repeated because they must be practiced. Choose friends who sharpen you. Guard your heart against seduction that asks you to trade your soul. Work honestly. Avoid the trap of laziness. Value a good name more than quick wealth. Listen to correction. Humility is the soil of wisdom. Notice what you worship when no one is watching and turn away from it before it becomes your ruin. These are not platitudes. They are survival instructions from a man who paid dearly for the lessons. Solomon's warnings about immoral women and idol worship are not isolated moral points. They are two sides of the same collapse. The seductress promises intimacy and belonging while asking for the surrender of the heart. Idolatry promises security and meaning while asking for the surrender of worship. Both ask a man to exchange the true for the counterfeit, and both end in loss. Solomon's life shows how easily a man can be led from one to the other. From a relationship that demands compromise to a life that worships what cannot save. Yet Proverbs does not leave the reader in despair. It offers a way forward. Wisdom is available. It can be sought, practiced, and passed on. The book's repeated invitations to listen, to accept instruction, to seek understanding are not mere commands. They are offers of restoration. A son who takes these words to heart can avoid the pitfalls that ruined his father. He can learn to govern himself before he governs others. He can build a life that honors what is lasting rather than what is fleeting. Solomon's final act in Proverbs is therefore both humble and heroic. He does not promise that his son will be perfect. He does not pretend that wisdom guarantees an easy life. He promises instead a better chance, the chance to see the traps before stepping into them, the chance to choose the long road over the shortcut, the chance to wear wisdom like armor and pass it on like a torch. That is the essence of the book, a father's attempt to save a son by giving him the tools to save himself. If a young man were to read only one book to begin, Proverbs is the book that speaks like a father. It is not a book of condemnation, but of care. It is not a manual for the flawless, but a map for the fallible. It is a voice that says, with the authority of experience, I have walked this road, learn from my steps. Let my warnings be your guardrails. If this perspective on Proverbs has helped you see the book differently, please like this video and subscribe for more explorations that bring ancient wisdom into modern life. Share this with someone who needs a father's voice. Thank you for listening.